I'm Rob.
And I'm Nate.
And welcome back to Rob and Nate Record a Podcast.
It is week 3 of Western Month. And one of the goals we set out for this month is to do a spaghetti Western. And so I was charged with selecting one. My principal criteria was what is free on Amazon Prime. But I saw 3 names associated with this film. And as soon as I saw those, I'm like, this is the movie we're going to watch. Sergio Leone, Henry Fonda, and Terence Hill for the 1973 Western, My Name is Nobody. So I came into this knowing basically just that, and briefly, I think like the sentence-long IMDb synopsis of the plot.
Which is a young, easygoing gunman worships and competes with an old gunfighter who only wants to retire.
Indeed. So, spaghetti Westerns. I like them. I haven't seen as many of them as I'd like. I have not seen the Man with No Name trilogy, probably the most famous spaghetti westerns there are, with Sergio Leone and Clint Eastwood. But I have seen Once Upon a Time in the West. I have seen the original Django, and I have seen, as have you, They Call Me Trinity, which is a film we watched a year or two ago.
It was before we did the podcast.
Yeah.
So it has to have been almost 2 years ago at this point.
Which I was quite taken with, which is why I showed it to you, and which Rob was quite taken with.
Great, yeah.
Starring Terence Hill, who is an Italian-born actor still with us in his early 80s. He's got a distinctive voice that I don't know if that's his voice, but it's the same guy who's dubbing the voice, because this is spaghetti western, so everybody's speaking their own language, and it's dubbed.
Yeah.
Though interestingly, though Italian-financed, this film, at least the exteriors, were largely shot in the United States, which is very unusual for spaghetti westerns, which are usually shot in Italy or Spain. The plot is, what that sentence entails, but obviously there's more to it than that. This is a weird, quirky film.
Yeah.
And what are some of your first impressions or thoughts on it?
It's entertaining throughout. And if you've seen a Terence Hill spaghetti western, they are very unique in style and in temperament. And it has that Terence Hill quirkiness in it throughout. And that is, I guess you could say, the underpinning of these of the movies that he's in. And I can't imagine this film without Terence Hill.
Mm.
He's the star of it. Henry Fonda's the biggest name, but Terence Hill is the star.
He has more screen time. Arguably, he's the one that pushes things forward.
Yeah.
When I was looking at this briefly, there was a line that described it as online as a semi-spoof, which I think is accurate, because there's spoofy things in it, especially around Terence Hill. But Henry Fonda plays his part completely straight. It's like Henry Fonda's in a different movie from Terence Hill's Nobody. And they've got a really interesting dynamic. So, obviously, Terence Hill is younger than Henry Fonda.
Yeah.
And he grew up hearing tales of Jack Beauregard, Fonda's character, is a famous gunman, and basically worshiping him and kind of modeling his life after him. And when they meet... and they meet several times, and they warm to each other over their meetings. Though
that first
Beauregard always thinks this is a very weird man.
Well, you can see why after that very first encounter or meeting, where Jack Beauregard is coming across the river, and Terence Hill, whose character name is Nasuno, he's caught a grasshopper and is using that as like fishing bait. And he's standing there with a club, and Jack Beauregard watches him, and then when the fish comes up to take the cricket, he clubs the fish and pulls it out, and that's how he catches his fish. And he gives him this look, and he just like holds up the fish and is like, "What do you want?" Like,
and then Henry Fonda gives him that look that he gives him several times, like, you're weird.
Yeah.
And they kind of have this dance around each other for a while before they more or less team up. But what's funny is what nobody's goal is for Jack Beauregard.
Uh-huh.
He wants to get him killed.
Yeah.
But he wants to get him killed in a memorable way that cements his place in history.
I'm realizing now Nasuno must be like Italian or something for nobody. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but it's the other thing that's kind of funny about this is how nobody is following Jack Beauregard around, and yet at the various times throughout the movie, he beats Jack Beauregard to the destination. with no explanation.
Well, that's because, again, they're from different movies. It occurred to me in the sequence where they go to the town, which might be Cheyenne, Wyoming, because it says Hotel Cheyenne on one of the buildings, and there's this kind of fun fair there, and nobody does all these weird kind of peeking behind things and making weird animal noises. And I'm like, he's a Warner Brothers cartoon character.
Pretty much.
He's Bugs Bunny going around doing zany stuff. And so there's obviously homages to Warner Brothers cartoons, and there's homages to what Warner Brothers cartoons were homages of, which is silent films.
Yeah.
And so there's these crazy sped up sequences, and that's only Terence Hill. Nobody else does this speed up thing where he's slapping people and he's running around and he's playing all sorts of pranks.
Can draw his gun 3 times before the other guy can reach for it. And...
You actually do get a little bit of other people doing the Keystone Cops bit towards the end when he steals the train.
Yeah.
They stole the train, and then it goes all
Who's
weird.
Who's driving it?
And then the film even goes so far as to do the circle thing, the zoom in, zoom out.
Yeah.
And just like really pressing home that this is Bugs Bunny in Warner Brothers cartoon. This is Doug Turpin in a Max Sennett short.
Yeah.
That's what we're going for. But there's also another very important theme to this film. Did you catch it?
Is it related to Jack Beauregard?
Yes, but not solely Jack Beauregard.
Okay, maybe I missed it.
This is a film about the end of the West.
Okay, yeah, I did catch that to a certain extent.
So it puts it in the same category as something like The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, which is about myth and reality at the end of the West.
Well, at one point they actually mentioned Valance as a character that Jack Beauregard has killed.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I must have missed that one. Also, The Shootist, which was John Wayne's last film.
I thought about mentioning that Valance comment to you when it came up. Like, I almost said, is that a reference to The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance? But yeah, I was like, okay, Nate didn't say anything. Maybe, you didn't react to it. So I was like, okay, maybe I'm wrong. But
more than anything, it is a reference and a rumination of sorts on Sam Peckinpah's The Wild Bunch. Because not only do we come across Sam Peckinpah's grave at the Indian reservation, but there is a Wild Bunch. Only instead of the roughly 10 or 12 people from Peckinpah's 68 film, there's 150.
Yeah, who ride like 1,000.
Yes, and it's also reminiscent of who are those guys from Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid?
Yeah.
There's this group of mercenaries that, luckily for Henry Fonda, carry dynamite in their pouches, because that comes in.
That's not
why
really,
is never.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's not really very well explained.
And precisely what they're doing is never fully explained. It's some kind of scheme with the way they refine gold.
Well, they're using the legitimate gold coming out of the mine to basically launder dirty gold that they've stolen.
Mm.
So they're mixing it with the dirty gold to a certain extent. Like they need a certain amount of it to be passed off as legitimate coming out of the mine so that they can pass off the rest of the gold. So they need a little bit of it refined properly so they can pass it off, as a representative sample, and then everything else can be mixed with the stolen stuff.
And that's Gene Martin, who's the other semi-name in the cast. Sullivan is the guy who's heading this scheme. Sullivan is involved, and the Wild Bunch is involved with the death of Nevada, who is Beauregard's brother, and nobody wants that to be the cause for which Beauregard will ride into battle with the hopelessly outnumbered by the Wild Bunch. And when we get to that scene where nobody's stolen the train and Beauregard's near the train tracks and he sees the Wild Bunch heading to get him for whatever reason, because he stole some gold and money from Sullivan. And it looks like he's going to stop and let him on, and then he stops the train and keeps backing up.
Every time he walks towards it, he backs up the train.
And he basically uses like hand gestures to indicate, no, you fight them.
Yeah.
I keep a record of what happens.
Well, and he makes a reference to that moment in the billiards place where he's like, well, we've removed the middle guy. He's like, I'm not being the middle guy. I'm staying out of the way. Mm. There's nothing between you and them anymore.
And as the 150 are riding towards him, and the camera backs out to show the beauty shot. I'm like, end it now, and with that weird, crazy expression on nobody's face, like, yeah, he's gonna die. But he likes him, but he's excited he's going to die. I'm like, that's how I would have cut the film.
I think he believed he wasn't gonna die. Think he believed he could do it.
Really?
Yeah.
But so that to me seemed like that's how you end the film. That's the climax.
I almost wondered as soon as that pan shot got
yeah, because the pan shot made it look like they were getting ready to cut. But it goes on, and he gets the Wild Bunch because he uses their shiny, show-offy saddlebags to aim at and explode their dynamite and kill a whole bunch of them. And the film goes on for like another 20 minutes.
Yeah. Well, and he has kind of a coda where he's writing this letter to nobody after he's supposed to be dead, and he's on his boat to sail off into the into his future,
which is this boat he'd been trying to get to in New Orleans the entire time because he wants to retire.
Yeah,
and Beauregard
but this is after nobody and Beauregard have gone into town, and nobody has beaten Jack Beauregard.
Yeah,
in a shootout.
They have a fake shootout because he's got to be killed. Yeah, and they use that to sneak him off on the boat. So he gets his retirement.
Yeah, he says,
but he also gets his legend.
Dead 3 days now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this film is also set very specifically in time. It's set in and around the 3rd of June, 1899.
Yep.
It's got some really pretty shots in it. I love the beautifully decrepit Western towns that you see in spaghetti Westerns, which are not the kind of the backlot stylized Westerns of a earlier time. But they're dirty, and they're kind of the way you'd imagine these towns look, and they're the way the ghost towns look that you still see around today.
Yeah. This movie was great. Its tempo is great. What did you make of that bar scene where he goes into the bar and does the whiskey shooting trick?
That is quite the set piece.
It's a kinetic scene.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So nobody goes to this bar, and they're having this contest with this guy named Squirrel, who looks like a squirrel, where he drinks from a bottle of beer, and then he throws the bottle back and he has to shoot it before it hits the ground.
And they're making wagers on whether he can
Yes, and they get increasingly smaller mugs, but the shooter gets increasingly drunk. So it continues to complicate it, and nobody beats him at it.
Well, this competition starts when nobody walks in and catches the glass out of the air, making Squirrel miss his glass. And then he walks to the bar, has the bartender fill it, and drains the beer. So Squirrel, comes up and starts this confrontation and basically challenges him to do the entire set, but using an entire bottle of whiskey. Fills the 4 progressively smaller glasses with whiskey, and so nobody stands there at the bar and drinks the largest glass first, throws it over his shoulder, hits it, and he's... as we learn, he's pretending to be progressively drunk. And when he gets to the shot-sized glass, he has to use both hands like catcher's mitts, to catch the glass, in between his hands because he's presumably seeing double. He hits the glass. After he finally shoots the glass, after someone catches it, he shoots it right out of the guy's hand. He goes back to the bar and is like, oh, set me up a whiskey. Totally sober. And yeah. It was great. I've actually seen that scene once before. It must have been on YouTube or something because I'd only seen that scene. And so, yeah. But it was, that's a great scene. This movie entirely, I'm going to have to just go out and look up more Terence Hill films now at this point and just watch a bunch of Terence Hill. He's hilarious.
I should also point out that this film, it was not, as I thought, directed by Sergio Leone.
It was written by Sergio Leone.
It's just based on an idea of his, and directed by a man named Tony Valerde.
Tonino Valeri.
Who has a fair credits, and has directed a number of spaghetti westerns. But this is actually the first film that comes up when you search him. This is his opus.
He also did the soundtrack for Django Unchained.
Well, that's probably Ennio Morricone, who did the really catchy soundtrack to this.
Or he has a credit on the soundtrack on that.
But the theme, Nobody's theme, is catchy and fun. It is a Morricone score, which we generally associate with something grander. So that he's playing against type here with the quirkiness of the music in this movie matches the quirkiness of its lead character.
Yeah. Yeah, this is fun. I did find one quick piece of trivia I wanted to share with you about the Sam Peckinpah gravestone. Okay. And it says, while walking through Boot Hill, which is this reservation where nobody and Jack meet up briefly in the movie, nobody points out to Beauregard that one of the names on a gravestone is Sam Peckinpah. That same year, Clint Eastwood in the High Plains Drifter had a Boot Hill scene that included Sergio Leone's tombstone, as well as a number of others.
This is this weird kind of homaging of each other among the Western directors of the time.
Yeah.
And I guess to wrap up, I did have just a kind of a weird observation that doesn't really... I don't know where else to place it here, but one thing I noticed about this film is there is not one female speaking part.
Doesn't the lady at the bar say something?
There is a line of dialogue spoken by a woman at the gunfight, but it never shows who it is. It's just in the crowd. It's like, he's going to shoot him. That is it.
I hadn't noticed that, but now that you pointed out, I can't think of anything else. So,
how would you rate this movie?
I would give this 8 out of 10 and 3 out of 4. On those two scales. Mm-hmm. How would you rate it?
I would give it 3 out of 4 on the 4-star, and I would give it probably 7 out of 10. I really enjoyed it, but in a way, it was too much. There was too much of the Terence Hill zaniness.
To a certain extent, though, that's also what makes the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it also kind of limits the movie, too.
Yeah.
But, I mean, it's enjoyable. It's weird. I think it's worth seeking out, especially if it's currently available for free on Prime.
Amazon Prime. This has an aggregate score on IMDb of 7.4 stars, and it has a Metacritic score of 68. It
has a 100% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Does it really?
Mm.
Wow. That's interesting. Yeah, it's funny how the different platforms work out that way sometimes. But yeah, this was a solid film. Like I said, Terence Hill, not having seen a huge amount of his catalog, I'm at this moment I'm struggling to imagine how you can go wrong watching a Terence Hill.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Spaghetti Westerns, they're fun. We're going to have to watch some more of these in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I'm Rob.
And I'm Nate.
And this is Rob and Nate Record a Podcast. Because you didn't want me looking this up ahead of time, I waited to look at the trivia, so now I'm curious to see if there's anything else really good in the trivia. This was Henry Fonda's final Western.
Oh, okay. He would die, this came out in 1973, he would die in 1982.
Yeah. The title is a famous quote of the Odyssey, Canto 9, when Odysseus tricks Polyphemus into believing his name is nobody.
Oh.
The bar scene with the shootout game had Neil Summers as Squirrel. Summers was a stuntman and appeared in many westerns and bit parts. He also appeared in the life and times of Judge Roy Bean. Steve Cannelly, as the false barber, also appeared in the life and times of Judge Roy Bean. Jeffrey Lewis, as the leader of the Wild Bunch, was also in many westerns, such as the Culpeper Cattle Company, High Plains Drifter, Bad Company, The High Chaparral, etc., Shoot the Sundown, and Tom Horn. Other familiar actors known for their work in westerns who appeared in the film were R.G. Armstrong, who was in Zane Grey Theater, Have Gun Will Travel, The Rifleman, The Tall Man, and Leo Gordon.
Was in Hondo.
Was Leo Gordon in Hondo, 10 Wanted Men, and Santa Fe Passage. The German import DVD has a Super 8 version, German language only, as a special feature on the disc. Really fun film.
Yeah.
That was a fun night. We laughed consistently throughout.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was just kind of the audacity of the thing. It's like, really? That's happening?
Yeah. I guess there's not a lot necessarily to dissect in a spaghetti western, but they're fun.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But this one did, this one was trying to say something that had that valedictorian
feeling with the end of Henry Fonda's career, I wonder how they got him to agree to this.
Well, he had worked with Leone before in Once Upon a Time in the West, where he played the bad guy.
Yeah.
For possibly the only time in his career.
Yeah.
So, this Once Upon a Time in the West was really Leone's wrap-up Western. He'd done the Man with No Name trilogy, he did this. And while he came up with the idea for the film, I can see why he would give it to an underling, because I think he felt like, I gotta stop doing these.
Yeah.
And he would only have one more really great film in his career, which would be the gangster epic Once Upon a Time in America from 1984, which, when it came out, was not well received because of the way it had been cut.
Okay.
But when the director's cut came out, that was revered. In fact, I have a memory that there was one film reviewer that listed Once Upon a Time in America as the worst film of the year. And then when the director's cut came out the next year, he said it was the best film of the year.
Wow.
So cutting can make a major
Yeah.
difference.
Well, of course it can. But yeah. How, this is a totally random tangent. How would you ever edit a Terence Hill spaghetti? That's got to be a challenge.
Yeah. The speed up sequences would not have been,
Yeah.
I imagine, super easy to do, even though really they've been doing those since kind of the beginning of filmmaking. So maybe it is easy.
Terence Hill isn't his given name, right? He was born as Mario Garotti.
Mm-hmm.
This trailer for Crime Busters that sounds like an American name, but I don't know.
He did apparently make some kind of crime comedies over in Italy with the same guy who played his brother in Trinity.
He's acting still today. There's a show called Don Mateo, it looks like. It's the credits go 2000 to 2020.
Oh.
Miami Super Cops. That's the title he made. I'm for the hippopotamus.
I'm not against the hippopotamus.
He's got some just great titles in his filmography. I'm serious. I'm gonna have to just jump on Prime and type his name in and see what they've got. So, yeah. All right. Well, I think we stretched this out for the outtakes.
Yeah.